Thank you for listening to this Podcast One production, available on Apple Podcasts and Podcast One.
Your life, your country. You're listening to the Laura Ingraham Podcast.
Oh boy, we have a lot to get to. The greatest show on earth, in my view, over the last 24 hours. Well, there are two things that happened that were, they were illustrative of so much of what the left has embraced and embarrassed itself with, namely political correctness, selling this victimhood narrative to African Americans to keep them, frankly, in bondage to the Democrat Party. Okay, so we're going to get into what Candace Owens did to this congressional committee, including Jerry Nadler, which is, of course, the left is going crazy because she called them all out for their race baiting. And as a black conservative woman, what are they going to do with her? She's very outspoken. She's very strong. She's young. So compare how she's treated versus how Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is treated. Well, Cortez won a congressional seat, so, okay, fine. That's good. I mean, that's impressive. But Candace Owens is an incredibly impressive person. And she, in so many ways, she's much more courageous than AOC, who knows she's going to get a free pass from the media and Hollywood, and she'll be embraced by both, precisely and only because she's left wing, and she sings the tune that they want to listen to, namely, government has to get bigger and more powerful in order to redistribute wealth, confiscate wealth, redistribute wealth, and so a bunch of elites in Washington can make all your decisions for you. I mean, she's not defying what the left wants. She's a little further left than the traditional Democrat Party. But it doesn't matter. As long as she's smashing Donald Trump and any of his allies, and we're going to get into what she's saying about the DHS, former Secretary of DHS, Kristen Nielsen, they want to intimidate people, not just from appearing in restaurants and speaking out publicly on issues. They want to make sure they never work again. This is what they're doing to people like Kirstjen Nielsen, saying she shouldn't work. She shouldn't get a job at speaking anywhere, at a university, or be on any corporate boards because of her role in child separation. So they get away with this stuff. Candace Owens goes up to Capitol Hill. She doesn't get away with anything. In fact, that's when the columns start being written by men who are suffering from terrible white guilt. Shelby Steele talks about the white guilt affliction that has done so much to cow and bring to heel these millennial and even kind of the younger baby boomer types. They're also they're suffering from this white guilt complex. It's just pathetic. And I'm talking about Dana Milbank. He writes this column in the Washington Post today, of course, trying to lay waste to Candace. And what he does, however, is he embarrasses himself further and he reveals himself. He cannot, and liberals cannot stand minorities who are conservatives. They don't think that's diversity. That doesn't count as diversity. So both Candace Owens' testimony on Capitol Hill and Bill Barr's testimony on Capitol Hill yesterday, he's testifying more this week, but this was something to behold. Bill Barr, Attorney General of the United States, goes up ostensibly for a budget hearing. Okay? Talk about budget priorities. And instead, it's just a slash and burn attempt by Democrats who, on this committee, in the Budget Committee, it's chaired by Jose Serrano, and I warned you about him last year, that he was going to become the head of this committee if indeed the Republicans lost in the midterms, which they did. But they use this as an opportunity to throw up more conspiracy theories and just complete falsehoods about Trump, Barr, Mueller, and what must really be in the report. Let's listen.
All we have is your 4-page summary, which seems to cherry pick from the report to draw the most favorable conclusion possible for the president and make definitive legal conclusions in less than 48 hours. I would argue it's more suspicious than impressive.
These people have to head to the retirement home. I mean, Nita Lowey of New York, she's reading every word. Heaven forbid she's able to talk off the cuff. So Bill Barr, again, just so you understand, the Attorney General of the United States, whose character and professionalism has, as far as I can tell, never been called into question. Okay, the guy could have been retired, enjoying his grandkids. You know, he's already was Attorney General almost 30 years ago. He's a CEO of one of the biggest telecom companies in the world, trying to enjoy a little bit of retirement. And he decides to come to Washington to try to make things better. And this is what the unserious, on Fox I called them the UP party, UP meaning unserious party. The GOP, grand old party, Democrats, UP, unserious party. They are not serious people. They are not interested in solving serious problems. They're interested in hating on Trump and resisting anything that Trump does. Really, pretty much anything, except maybe criminal justice reform, which they grudgingly agreed to and voted for. But other than that, there's pretty much anyone who appears on Capitol Hill who works for this administration. That's what they're going to do. This is exactly so. So Bill Barr is guilty of some type of, to listen to her, what she's implying here, some type of nefarious, suspicious conspiracy to distort the findings of the special counsel, only then weeks later to be embarrassed when the special counsel's report is released in full, minus any material that needs to be redacted. That's what Nita Lowey is saying. This is how cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs these people are.
Your conclusion is something we've seen before. In June 2018, you wrote a memo as a private citizen and a former attorney general to the Department of Justice, laying out the president's case against obstruction of justice. Your audition clearly went well.
What a snide, snarky, insulting, irresponsible comment by an old hack who needs to retire. She's become a hack. These people become caricatures of themselves. Again, you're sitting across from one of the most esteemed legal thinkers, professionals, who, in frankly, of the last 30 years, Bill Barr, and you're calling into question his character? What have you done for your constituents lately? What has Nita Lowey really done to make this country better? For heck, to make New York better? Was she campaigning against moving all those factories up in upstate New York out of New York and into China? Did she stand up and say, "Look, our whole state is suffering because of this globalization"? She didn't do jack. And the fact that a single person can go into a voting booth and pull the lever for her is stunning to me. After watching her, and again, she's been around for decades and decades and decades. Bill Barr looks across the table, and I think he's thinking to himself, well, this is our Congress. This is a complete and utter embarrassment. And it got so bad, by the way, that you even had Bill Barr being questioned about topics and policies over which he has no responsibility at all. like health care.
Well, I'm dismayed to hear that you're willing to drive our healthcare system off the cliff with no plan for replacing it.
I think your premise that the Justice Department makes healthcare policy is simply wrong. We take legal positions in cases.
Okay, so he's not in control of healthcare, but we have a cabinet secretary who shows up on Capitol Hill willingly, comes to Capitol Hill, and what they decide to do is use it as an opportunity to smash Trump for rightly declaring Obamacare a disaster which should not be defended in court. Now, I think the Republicans should block grant everything to the states, say this is how much money you're getting. However you want to spend your money for health care, you go ahead and spend it. You want to spend it on illegal aliens, you go spend it on illegal aliens. You want to spend it on expanding Medicaid, you go spend it on expanding Medicaid. You want to have more free market transparency requirements in place, then have at it. But we're not giving you another penny, state by state. That's what they should say. Instead, it's like, well, we're against Obama. We're not going to replace it. Mitch McConnell's like, I'm not doing a vote on this. I'm sick of that. I'm tired of these people. I'm tired of all these people. But Bill Barr was awesome. You know, I love Raymond Arroyo is with us here on the Laura Ingraham podcast. You know, Raymond knows why I really adore Bill Barr and his performance because he's a curmudgeon. Not that I could be a curmudgeon.
You know what it is? He knows more than they do, and he knows.
Oh!
And he lets them know it. Those responses, there was that one response, I don't know if we played it, where they asked him at some point about, aren't you upset about this immigration policy? And now the administration wants us to change things. And the guy went on and on in the question. And Barr said, well, you seem like you don't like it, so I think everything will be fine then. Don't worry about it. Like, totally. You're the member of Congress.
Why don't you change it?
If you're upset, don't vote for it.
Yeah, why don't you change it?
Right? That was a great, oh my
Why
God.
don't you change it?
Was that a great response?
And the fact that these people are sitting there prattling on about Mueller in Russia when our country is under constant assault, it's her sovereignty. 104 or 3,000 people now, it's official, were apprehended and basically most of them released in the month of March. We are populating America with hundreds of thousands of people at a time because of our open border and the fact that Congress couldn't put in like 48 hours of hard work. Actually, you can do it in like 3 hours and rewrite these a couple of pieces of legislation.
Wouldn't you like to go and find out where do they take these people? Because some of them are driven up, some of them are put on planes, some of them are put on buses, and they go into the heartland of America. They're in Iowa. They're in Idaho.
No. And look at any construction project. You have a home being built in your area. The guy up on the roof who doesn't have a safety cable. A lot of these folks just came here. And you know why I know this is because I often strike up conversations with individuals.
And when you get in my country,
mi país is Honduras.
They really should. That E-Verify. Very idea that the Republicans, decade after decade, generation after generation,
they want the cheap labor,
have not passed E-Verify and shut down these businesses. Trump just last
every
week,
single one down.
You saw that big raid in Texas.
220 people, but we need that. I mean, that could happen every day, every minute of every day, and you would make a dent in this population.
Well, and you and I were just talking about these agencies, the bloat of these agencies, and how Reagan threatened to shut down the education department.
Anything.
But you see how he's now targeting the Office of Personnel, and
OPM, Personnel Management.
And management. Yeah, he's targeting that agency to melt it down.
All these departments, HUD,
Interior,
HHS, Interior,
Education. All these could be returned to the states with no.
We could have some park rangers in the federal park. That's fine.
That's all we need. We need a park service office.
What was Yogi Berra's park ranger friend?
Jellystone.
That was a.
Hey, boo-boo. Wait, put out that fire.
Oh, my God. I want to thank all of our sponsors, Genucel, Sarah Vital. Delta Animal Rescue, they're awesome. I said yesterday, Raymond, you weren't here, that I am going to become Doris Day. Like, why am I even doing this political stuff?
You're already. You could take over. She's 94. You could take over her reserve in
every
California.
time. I do weep. I'm going to be one of those people living in the tree so they can't cut it down. Remember the tree squatters over there in Washington State? They would live up there for months. So the trees.
I'm gonna, like that Jane.
I'm going to be cutting those.
That woman is who talks to the gorillas.
Jane Goodall. I'd like to study with Jane Goodall. Is she still alive? I think she is. Those great apes, I could live with them. I could just live with the great apes. I could do that. I could just go and sit in the bush, and they come and they play with your hair. The great apes, they're incredible.
Eat your cranium.
Eat your cranium. Well,
like a melon.
That's one of the
Crack
risks.
your head like a melon.
That's one of the risks. And these great sponsors. Brush Hero, which we love. You want to clean some of that outdoor furniture. It's incredible product. All of these companies help provide this podcast, providing it to you for free, a number of times every week, and that's why you have it. We have great sponsors. So you're going to learn more about Animal Rescue from Delta, Genucel, Serovital, Legacy Box, and Brush Hero later on in the show. So this is what the left has done, though. They have taken this opportunity, and it's. I think they're making a pretty big mistake, but I don't really want to give them advice because it'll help them. They've overplayed their hand. And it happens on a macro and a micro level. It happens globally on the left, and you're seeing the results of it in these elections all over the world, where they think, we got him now. Turns out the populists always winning, right? But it also happens on the micro level. In this small examples, so someone like a Candace Owens shows up on Capitol Hill. The faces of those congressmen yesterday. They don't know what to do with her. Oh no, she looks at them. She calls them out. Let's just play a snippet of this. We're going to get into more of this. Again, Candace Owens is African-American woman in her 20s who used to be, still is a Democrat, actually, still calls herself a Democrat. And she basically saw the light about what the Democrat Party was doing to African-Americans and selling a constant and destructive narrative of victimhood, which she rightly believes keeps people in bondage to the government instead of giving people a sense of freedom and understanding and hope, real hope, that with hard work and staying out of trouble, you can lead a good life in America. And she's just sick of it. So this is part of what she said yesterday.
White supremacy, racism, white nationalism, words that once held real meaning have now become nothing more than election strategies. Every 4 years, the black community is offered handouts and fear. Handouts and fear. Reparations and white nationalism. This is the Democrat preview. There isn't a single adult today that in good conscience would make the argument that America is a more racist or a more white nationalist society than it was when my grandfather was growing up. And yet we're hearing these terms sent around today because what they want to say is that brown people need to be scared, which seems to be the narrative that we hear every 4 years right ahead of a presidential election.
Well, she was loaded for bear. And she got into it with a number of members of the committee. What was the ostensible reason for her appearing yesterday? What was the purpose of her appearing?
Well, Republicans invited her, but she goes on to explain that she was a victim of a hate crime when
so
she was
in high school. So it was a hate crimes?
Yeah, it was a hate crimes
hearing?
and white supremacy. The main thrust of it was the Democrats.
That's a brilliant idea to invite her, though. This is the kind of stuff. This is playing their jujitsu and one-upping them, to mix my metaphors. So this is like a roundhouse kick to the face of Nadler and company.
I received word on my way in that many of the journalists were confused as to why I was invited, and none of them knew that I myself was the victim of a hate crime when I was in high school. That's something that very few people know about me because the media and the journalists and the left are not interested in telling the truth about me because I don't fit the stereotype of what they like to see in black people. I'm a Democrat. I support the President of the United States, and I advocate for things that are actually affecting the black community.
Oh, that sounds like a perfect person to speak at the hearing. But they didn't like that. The Democrats are in charge now.
The president's rhetoric fans the flames with language that, whether intentional or not, may motivate and embolden white supremacist movements. We only need to look at the perpetrators of violence and hate to see the impact this rhetoric has had. For example, the New Zealand shooter declared that he supports President Trump, quote, as a symbol of renewed white identity and common purpose, close quote.
Okay, so that's Nadler kind of setting up his holier than thou. Well, so hate crimes are obviously found. Trump, whether he knows it or not, this is all. By the way, hate crimes have been going up since 2013, is what Bill Barr said yesterday. 2013. They tried to nail Bill Barr on that as well. We didn't play that last night on The Angle, but I watched that. Okay, so Ted Lieu, and when I think of Lieu, I think of loser, says this.
I don't know Miss Owens. I'm not going to characterize her. I'm going to let her own words do the talking. So I'm going to play for you the first 30 seconds of a statement she made about Adolf Hitler.
I agree. I actually don't have any problems at all with the word nationalism. I think that it gets the definition gets poisoned by elitists that actually want globalism. Globalism is what I don't want. So when you think about whenever we say nationalism, the first thing people think about, at least in America, is Hitler. You know, he was a National Socialist, but if Hitler just wanted to make Germany great and have things run well, okay, fine. Problem is that he had dreams outside of Germany. He wanted to globalize. He wanted everybody to be German, everybody to be speaking German.
Well, they edited that bite. But does Lou do that to all people who come to testify before the committee? Go back and selectively edit their comments and unplay them? I mean, is he a shock jock now? Lou? Loser? And then this is where it went from there.
Ms. Owens, I'm sorry. We just started recording. Would you like time to respond to that?
Yes, I think it's pretty apparent that Mr. Lieu believes that black people are stupid and will not pursue the full clip in its entirety. He purposely presented an extracted clip.
The witness will suspend for a moment. It is not proper to refer disparagingly or to a member of the committee. The witness will not do that again. Witness may continue.
Sure, even though I was called despicable.
The witness may not refer to a member of the committee as stupid.
I didn't refer to him as stupid. That's not what I said.
That's right.
That's not what I said at all. You didn't listen to what I said. May I continue?
Please.
Now, they can attack her. They can infer that she's a secret Hitler supporter. Okay? They can call things despicable related to her, but she can't really defend herself. Talk about an exclusive club up there on Capitol Hill. They protect their own.
Suddenly the rules of the Hill have great import. Everything. You will not address a member of the committee in a negative, disparaging tone. Oh, really?
Everyone knows what she was saying there. Even if you don't hear the whole clip, you know what she's saying. Okay? You understand what she's saying. The left tries to call the people who believe in borders and are against losing our leverage to China, we're Nazis? What? The National Socialist Party was the party dominant in the extermination and running the extermination of Jews, Polish Jews, people who are helping Jews. This is what Hitler's party did. The National Socialist Party. Okay? That's what they did. They're socialist in their own understanding of what socialism meant. But they're such facile thinkers on the left. They don't know history. They don't know the Ku Klux Klan was started by a Democrat. They don't understand what the Democrats did in opposition to the civil rights movement. They parrot whatever they saw on Reddit today. Like that's on Reddit, there was a complete embarrassment. By the way, I want to remind all of you, if you're listening to this podcast, that when we talk about things like Legacy Box and being able to organize all your old photos, it's meant to make your life easier. It make your life better because the last thing you want is more clutter, junk in drawers, boxes. You never look at them. Your family doesn't enjoy them. Legacy Box is going to change that. It's going to change your life the way you preserve your memories. And I'm talking about VHS recording, tapes, camcorder tapes, audio tapes, photos. It's time to get those things digitized before it's too late. Legacybox.com. All you do is go there. They'll send you a kit and you get 40% off your first order. If you're going to hold on, I'll tell you how to do that. But you send all the stuff, the photos, the audio tapes, camcorder tapes. They digitize it all for you. Then send it back. You can get a thumb drive. You can get a digital download. You can get DVD if you want that. And then it's like magic. Okay. All you do is go to legacybox.com/Laura. Okay. legacybox.com/Laura. And then you save 40% off your first order. So get all that stuff in on your first order and organize yourself. You get that big discount. legacybox.com/Laura. 40% today. Okay. Get started preserving your past. So back to the Inquisition. Newt Gingrich called them the Inquisitors on the Ingraham angle. This is not oversight. This is not, we appreciate and we respect and we demand honest congressional oversight of this administration, any administration. That's their constitutional obligation. This is not oversight. This is character assassination.
As I said, he is assuming that black people will not go pursue the full 2-hour clip. And he purposefully he cut off, and you didn't hear the question that was asked of me. He's trying to present as if I was launching a defense of Hitler in Germany, when in fact, the question that was asked of me was pertaining to whether or not I believed that whether or not I believed in nationalism, and that nationalism was bad. And what I responded to was that I do not believe that we should be characterizing Hitler as a nationalist. He was a homicidal, psychopathic maniac that killed his own people. A nationalist would not kill their own people. That is exactly what I was referring to in the clip, and he purposely wanted to give you a cut-up similar to what they do to Donald Trump to create a different narrative. That was unbelievably dishonest, and he did not allow me to respond to it, which is worrisome and should tell you a lot about where people are today in terms of trying to drum up narratives.
Oh, no. This was the best thing. They kept panning the panel, the budget panel, the faces. People were looking down. There were people had their hands on their chin, like leaning on their chin, like, they were so annoyed by the mere fact that she defended herself and was there. So is this oversight or is this character assassination?
By the way, I would like to also add that I work for Prager University, which is run by an Orthodox Jew. Not a single Democrat showed up to the embassy opening in Jerusalem. I sat on a plane for 18 hours to make sure that I was there. I'm deeply offended by the insinuation of revealing that clip without the question that was asked of me.
Good for her. Good for I love this. I love this. I love the fact that she did this. I love the fact that Bill Barr called out these people and gave them the respect they deserved, which is a veneer of respect with a seething contempt underneath. You could just see that's why I said I would love to have the subliminal thoughts of Bill Barr. See, Bill Barr can't do what Candace Owens doing because he's a cabinet secretary. She can go up there and just.
But he and Alex Azar, who is the HHS secretary,
they're great.
They both sort of did their own gentle clapbacks. I noticed, and you see the way social media works. Nancy Pelosi, in a rigor mortis-like applause moment during the State of the Union, becomes a hero. But these guys actually are using rational thought to contain ridiculous ideas and turn them back on themselves, and nobody gives them any credit at all.
No, well, we do. This is why you watch the Ingraham angle on Fox.
The only place I've seen these bites.
No.
The only place.
And it takes me sitting there watching hours and hours and hours and using time codes and edit this, cut it to this, fast forward to. But it takes a lot of time to do this, but you have to want to do this. And most people don't have time to watch hearings. They're not that interested in the hearings. Yeah. But these little moments that we're sharing with you, okay, this is very important as an American for you to hear. And if you're listening across the globe and you're not an American, this gives you a bird's eye view into how brave these members of the Trump administration and anyone supporting them in any way are. I mean, they're brave people because they know these people exist not to do oversight, but to kill them.
To do you in.
To do you in. Like, do oversight, but to do you in. When I kill them, kill their career, make sure they never work again, make sure they're called racist. And Alex Azar, the HHS secretary, everyone knows, full disclosure, he's an old friend of mine. So Alex Azar was deputy HHS secretary. The deputies really, in many ways, run the day-to-day operation of the department's massive department. So he was deputy under Bush, okay? Then he was senior vice president of Lilly, running all of their North American operations, one of the biggest drug companies in the world. clerk for Justice Scalia, top of his class at Yale Law School. I mean, this is one of the smart guys. Okay. And HHS is responsible for picking up the pieces of the carnage that the Congress won't deal with, namely the crush of humanity at the border. HHS, it's their charge with caring for the children and the family units. Okay. And so they want to tag him with the kids in cages nonsense. Okay. They want to tag him with that.
We are getting 300 to 350 unaccompanied alien children crossing the border and referred to HHS every single day right now. These are 10, 12, 13, 15-year-old kids. They're not coming with parents. They're coming across the border by themselves.
What is the capacity of the child prison system that you're seeking with this money?
You keep saying prison system. If you've got an alternative approach to how to care for these children, please tell us, because
well, let me give that to you.
It'd be nice if you told us how to do that.
Oh, let me explain it to you, Jeff Merkley from Oregon. Jeff Merkley. I wouldn't hire him to run a lemonade stand in the desert, okay? The guy is just a grandstander. What do you want us to do? Just release them into society to be trafficked, turned into prostitutes, turned into little drug mules? Because we should just release them to anyone who says they're tangentially related to them? Is that really? I mean, see, I think Alex Azar is exactly right. You need to press these Democrats. What are you going to do about this? Because we're left to deal with your mess, Congress, because you want open borders. Okay. So do you prefer that we have no child care centers, which guess how much we pay $120 a day to keep the kids in these detention centers. Money. $120 a day. Thousands and thousands. What do they want us to do? Jeff Merkley, tell us what you want us to do. By the way, there was another example of, this is what I was doing yesterday. I was acting like a producer because I love to watch this stuff, and I find these narratives. The Trump administration being berated. Steve Mnuchin, who's the Treasury Secretary, of course, worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Guy's incredibly successful. Again, moved to Washington to try to help. This is what he dealt with.
Secretary Mnuchin, will you comply with the law by the deadline tomorrow?
As I said before, we will follow the law.
You're not afraid that you will be fired if, in fact, you release the returns?
Well, I'm not afraid of being fired at all. I've said we will follow the law.
Okay, and you are clear, and I'm very pleased you're not afraid of being fired.
Would you say Ferd? Fred? Afraid of being Fred? I wasn't following that. Maxine has some interesting grammatical constructions in her elucidation of her version of the facts. It's quite fascinating.
I don't believe I've ever met a Russian oligarch.
So you never met or talked with or had any conversations with Mr. Deripaska or with Mr. Victor Vekselberg or anybody about sanctions. Is that correct?
That is correct. I've never met either of them.
No, not met, but had a conversation with, period.
I've never had any conversation with either one of them.
Okay, let us continue.
By the way, that she was so flummoxed by going down a rabbit hole on this Deripaska. Well, she was, of course, asking about Russian sanctions. Well, didn't you send wasn't Rat Pack Entertainment? She was going on about this company, Rat Pack Entertainment, and a guy who bought an interest in another company was someone whom he knew, and she was trying to connect this bizarre. Another saying, you have a conflict of interest.
It was like a Rachel Maddow full screen. None of it made sense.
It was like,
but it helps if you can pronounce the names of the people in question.
She couldn't say any of that. We didn't even play the worst
Oleg Derla. Well, I'd say no, I didn't meet him either, even if I had, because she didn't pronounce the name properly.
No, there were all sorts of Lavatkin. She goes, an oligarch. I mean. And then at the end, he says, Mnuchin says, well, just for the record, I believe the individual to which you're referring isn't from Russia. So he actually isn't Russian. I'm talking about this Lavatkin guy. It's someone from one of the stands or something. He's not from Russia. So he's not an oligarch and he's not from Russia. Oh, it was hilarious. What's wrong with me that I find that this is my entertainment? People are like, did you see this on Netflix? No, I'm watching hearings. That's really a sad life. I got to do that. I got to do that Doris Day thing. I'm going to do the Doris Day Ranch for animals. I'll work for the Delta Animal Rescue people. They're great. By the way, the skincare that you have now will help you, your skin survive what's coming up, which is the summer months. Okay, summer months, brutal on your skin. And I know you put sunscreen on, at least SPF 30, and stay out of this direct sunlight, wear a hat, all that. But you can't help but have some sun exposure. And the weather changes. It's never good for you. And if depending on where you live, you can wear very dry climates, terrible for your skin. And there's lots of changes going on in the weather, and you feel it. And it doesn't look your best. Well, that means you have to get with my friends at Chamonix, who make the great Genucel line of products. So many of you sense that, your skin around your chin, your jawline, going into your neck, that starts to suffer more so than maybe on your cheek and so forth. You want that to look its best. And it's a different type of skin than under your eyes. You can try the Genucel jawline treatment for free. Okay? This is a great, great opportunity. Try that for free when you get the Genucel for under eye bags and puffiness. How have you liked your under eye bags and puffiness? It is nice, isn't it?
It is gone.
It's very...
No baggies.
No, you never have bags.
No bags.
No, but it is nice, though.
It is.
I
put it on
gel.
before
It's very
I
light.
go to bed.
Yeah.
And it's very, it's soothing.
Translucent.
And then I wake up and
look at how great you
nary
look.
a bag to be seen.
You don't have any bags, so it looks...
That helps.
It helps. It really looks good. So you get 100% money back guarantee. Just text EYES1 to 77453. EYES, EYES1 to 77453, or go to Genucel.com. You order the under eye bags and puffiness, and then you get the jawline treatment, yours free. Remember, order now and 3-day shipping is still free. Again, text EYES1 to 77453 or go to Genucel.com. Let's go to Susan in Alabama on the line. Susan, welcome.
Hi, Laura.
Hey,
my new hero is Candace Owens. I watched her yesterday at the hearing. If anyone had a right to be there, she did.
She made the point that she was attacked, I think, when she was in Pennsylvania, and the media didn't care one bit about it. They drove her out of a restaurant, threw stuff at her, Antifa showed up. They don't care. Then Dana Milbank, he's a poster boy. He used to be not so left wing, and I've always had a good relationship with him. He used to come on my radio show and I think my old MSNBC show, if my memory serves me correct. But he writes his column in the Washington Post, just attacking Candace Owens. And like, Dana, really? Would you do that? Would you? If she went up on Capitol Hill as a liberal and said all the same types of things about, I'm not going to be held hostage by any narrative that defines me as a victim, and she gave this really strong presentation from a more liberal perspective and was a young black woman who maybe said some things that you could edit and out of context could, maybe weren't the best things to say. What do you think Dana Milbank would be doing with that column? It'd be like saying how great she was and, oh, thank goodness we have a strong, young African-American woman standing her ground. But when you have a conservative, you got to destroy her because, heaven forbid, the word of Candace Owens spreads. You don't have to be hostage to the Democrat Party any longer. You do not have to be a victim. What if that starts to spread? The Blexit movement. That's what they're afraid of.
If they actually were concerned about white nationalism, they would be holding hearings on Antifa, a far-left, violent white gang who determined one day in Philadelphia in August that I, a black woman, was not fit to sit in a restaurant. They chased me out. They yelled race traitor to a group of black and Hispanic police officers who formed a line to protect me from their ongoing assaults. They threw water at me. They threw eggs at me. And the leftist media remained silent on it. They were serious about the rise of hate crimes. They may perhaps be examining themselves and the hate that they have drummed up in this country.
By the way, Newt Gingrich summed this up perfectly about what the left has now become obsessed with resisting Trump, no matter what principles of fairness and kindness and objectivity are violated.
You get the level of hatred from these folks that Lincoln got from the slave owners. I mean, you have a level of just deep vitriolic hatred, and they think that anything they can do is okay because they're pure, and anything they do to us is okay because we're bad.
By any means necessary. Take them out. It's by any means necessary. That's what the left is. And so it's almost like the Weather Underground and the Black Panther, all of that. I mean, they're not blowing buildings up or anything, but they're blowing people up, their careers up, or trying to. And Raymond and I have talked about this. If Trump pulls out re-election in 2020, what are they going to do then? I mean, I think Trump has a pretty good shot.
Kirstjen Nielsen will be known for implementing a cruel policy of forcibly separating parents and children rather than strengthening our border or strengthening our security as a country. She had a background in cybersecurity, but I think that's not what she's going to be known for. And it frankly has to raise the question for anyone who's offered a cabinet opportunity with President Trump, whether their reputation will survive.
They are trying to make it so unpleasant for people to move here, to work here, to participate in this administration that Donald Trump basically can't find anyone. I have to say, this is sheer evil. This is evil. It's demonic. Chris Coons what happened to him? He never used to be this far left either. They've all moved toward Antifa. This is Antifa-like rhetoric. Really, this is what Antifa does with physical threats, but they're doing it with verbal threats. What Chris Coons did there is implicitly threaten individuals who want to come serve this country as civil servants. We will destroy you. And AOC was out there retweeting comments about how no one should be able to get jobs, who were part of, quote, stealing thousands of children in the largest scale human rights violation. I don't think you can say largest scale. Let's go to Kevin in Wisconsin, joining us now on the line. Kevin.
Good morning, Laura. How are you?
I'm great.
Just want to say you're my fave, so it's an honor to be on with you. I just, on social media, saw the video of Candace Owens blasting the mob on Capitol Hill, and good for her. She was awesome. She made fools out of those people, and then also, the Omar saying being anti-Semitic again about Stephen Miller and saying he's a white nationalist. I mean, it's just I sent you an email on this, and it's just they're so out of control with this race thing. They just make fools out of themselves. They can't win on the policy issues, so they just resort to that all the time. And isn't the ultimate form of racism to stereotype a huge group of people, like stereotyping 60 million Trump voters? I mean, it's just...
They are beyond nasty. This is the anti-freedom movement. They are the anti-freedom movement. They're unserious, they're vicious, and I'm glad America's seeing them for who they are now. That's good. We're all seeing it. And if you're African American, you're listening to this podcast, guess what? You too can be as brave and as strong and as successful as you want without feeling obligated to the Democrat Party. Because Donald Trump's going to put more money in your pocket by freeing up this economy from the likes of these people who were embarrassed by a 28-year-old young woman yesterday. Donald Trump's actually trying to make the country better for all people of all backgrounds, all races and ethnicities. And from criminal justice reform to the economic progress we've made, it's just stunning. This is stunning progress. You don't have to be beholden to the Democrat Party. All they do all day long is try to tear down things. Our history, our patriotism, our traditions, our border. That's what they're doing. And you don't have to be part of that. That's a dead end road. It's not getting you anywhere. Who wants to be a victim? Who wants to be a victim? Being a victim is disempowering. The way you're empowered is you make your own way. You challenge the orthodoxy of low expectations, which is what the left has. They have low expectations. Candace Owens comes along, Justice Thomas, Tom Sowell, Shelby Steele. The list goes on and on. They don't know what to do with a conservative minority. So what they do is try to destroy them. I want to remind all of you that the folks at Brush Hero, oh my goodness, we just got our Brush Hero in the Ingraham household. The thing that I've got to say, I hate taking about the patio furniture out for the summer, the spring and summer, is that you have to clean the stuff, and it gets caked with mold and dirt and grime and little stuff from the trees falling up. And you get the Brush Hero. This works wonders on outdoor furniture made in the US of A, which I love. And they were originally just, the Brush Hero product was originally designed for cars and motorcycles. So you want to get stuff off the rims of your tires, stuff that's embedded in your car. Then it was great for that. But now you can use it for grills, tools, virtually anything that it has grime on it. And Brush Hero lives up to, all the accolades, and I'm so happy for the folks at this company. And you just hook it up to a simple garden hose, and it rinses as it scrubs, so it just makes your life so much easier. I cannot stand scrubbing that patio furniture every year, and now I don't have to. It's a great gift, by the way, for Mother's Day or Father's Day, or someone who you are a motorcyclist, mountain biker, anyone who loves to have clean products that some of them sit outside or spend some time outside. You'll save yourself an enormous amount of time, and just everything looks sparkly and clean. You'll love it. By the way, my listeners get 15% off everything at Brush Hero. Just go to brushhero.com/pages/Laura. Okay? brushhero.com/pages/Laura. Use the promo code Laura at checkout.
During my formative years, I had the privilege of growing up in my grandfather's home. It's going to shock the committee, but not once, not in a single breath of a conversation did my grandfather tell me that I could not do something because of my skin color. Not once did my grandfather hold a gripe against the white man. I was simply never taught to view myself as a victim because of my heritage. I learned about faith in God, family, and hard work. Those were the only lessons of my childhood.
She decided to go to Capitol Hill and tell her truth. The left is all about my truth. I'm speaking my truth. But boy, they don't really live up to that my truth standard when a conservative African-American woman is saying my truth. This is her story. I thought all voices need to be heard. Oh, they hated the fact that she was up there. Oh, what congressman invited her? Get me that person. That's brilliant. This was brilliant. This thing is going viral, though, all over. Everybody's watching this, commenting on my Twitter feed, on Facebook. We posted the whole thing on Facebook, so you can watch the entire exchange. You have to watch the entire exchange. Don't just watch 30-second clip, because it gets better as it goes on. And ditto for Bill Barr's testimony, which we also will have in its entirety. By the way, we're going to get into what he's saying right now on Capitol Hill about the Russian conspiracy theories. Our friends over at Grabian are tweeting out all these great sound bites right now. It's happening right now. So we'll try to get all this to you. We're joined now by Dr. Wilfred Riley, whose book, you remember it, Hate Crime Hoax, The Left's Campaign to Sell a Fake Race War, that just came out in February. He's at Kentucky State University, historically black college, and he's on tenure track in poli-sci. He joins us now. Dr. Riley, Candace Owens goes up to Capitol Hill, and she just laid waste to the idea that if you're black, you have to be a liberal Democrat, and you have to stay, as she said, on the on the Democrat plantation. And she said he doesn't have to be that way. And they did not know what to do with her yesterday. So they tried to embarrass her and so forth. And I think she ended up embarrassing them.
Yeah, I think Owens did very well. I mean, so one of the things you see on the political left is this constant focus on diversity. We need diversity of gender in things like dangerous jobs or pro sport. We need diversity of race almost everywhere, but rarely do SJWs, I don't know about classical liberals, but rarely do social justice types extend diversity to anything meaningful. Certainly not diversity of opinion, diversity of ideology. So when a leftist says, I'm for the people, what they really mean is I'm for the left. This is what communist movements used to say. The people in the Cuban Revolution clearly didn't include the priests and small farmers and wealthy people, chefs, and so on down the line that were brutalized and killed. So at a much lower level, obviously no one's trying to kill her, Candace Owens received the same sort of treatment. When she said, Candace Owens is pretty politically moderate, actually, as I am myself, or at least was until recently. I've listened to her interviews with Dave Rabin.
Well, she's a Democrat. She said, I'm still a Democrat yesterday.
Really? She's still registered? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you listen to Candace Owens with Dave Rabin, she talks a very, very middle-of-the-road position on things like abortion, where she says, obviously, there's a difference between Plan B and a 9th-month abortion, which I would agree with. I mean, so she doesn't strike me as a right-wing partisan of any kind, but simply being heterodox. And you see this all the time in the academy. Just being heterodox and saying, look, I don't believe this. I'm making some money. I might start voting Republican. I don't feel like a victim. Those normal centrist perspectives are, as you put it, off the plantation. And you see this all the time. I mean, guys like Bill Maher, Eric Weinstein, almost everyone in the intellectual dark web, a group I've done some work with through Andy Ngo and Quillette, most of them are Democrats. 75% probably. But these are just considered even left-wing thoughts that can't be said. So the Iron Curtain is a strong one if you're talking about social justice. There's a lot you're just not supposed to express.
Well, I think what has become glaringly obvious is that they didn't know how to deal with Trump, who came along and said, well, I think the Republicans screwed everything up in these wars and this selling our future out to China and not holding them accountable. And he went after the Bushes. He went after the Obamas. He went after the Clintons. He went after the media, and he called them all out. Now he's, rough and tumble, and sometimes he goes a little overboard on the tweets and so forth. But the left hadn't dealt with anyone like him before. Someone like a Pat Buchanan in 1992, he didn't have the money that Trump had. He couldn't self-fund. He didn't have social media. He didn't have Twitter. So they don't know what to do with Trump, right? They tried Russian collusion. That didn't work. And so now they're relegated to, you can't vote for him because he's a bad, awful, racist, horrible, awful, rotten person. And everyone associated with him should never work again. That they're saying now they should never work again. So this is how tolerant and open-minded they are about hearing the truth of women and minorities who do work in the administration. No one's truth matters except the socialist Democrat truth. That's the only truth that matters.
Yeah, if you're an upper-middle-class American from a city, and I think to some extent we both are, there's an incredible limit on what you're supposed to be allowed to say. And I think everyone kind of recognizes this. And this is why people make jokes about PC and social justice. I mean, both those terms are punchlines today. A whole bunch of things that are just absolutely obvious. Crime rates differ among ethnic and age groups. Men and women are different, and both kind of enjoy this most of the time. These sort of obvious points are taboo. They're off the reservation. By the way, you're not supposed to say off the reservation. It's a racist term. So I think most people know this is BS, but you don't want to lose your job on the trading floor at the small college or whatever by saying it. And what got Trump elected to some extent was that he just told the truth. He told some lies, too, in flamboyant fashion. But he said a whole bunch of obvious things. The elite in this country doesn't care much about poor whites in the Midwest was a consistent theme of his campaign. A lot of the things that he was accused of saying that were allegedly just terrible are pretty obvious fact. I mean, when he said Antifa and neo-Nazis are both bad people, I don't think that there are 5% of Americans that disagree with that. So what Trump did was just ignore the narrative that he was supposed to adhere to, whereas, for example, Jeb Bush or Marco Rubio was a product of that background and was never quite able to do that. That's why Trump got elected. And by the way, across the aisle, you saw Bernie Sanders kind of do the same thing, where he said openly, I'm a socialist. I think the rich in this country are a bunch of thieves. I don't think these hedge fund bosses should be billionaires. You shouldn't import a surf class from overseas. Well, I bet he's going to go back on that this election. And again, these just obvious points. Are some rich traders crooks resonated with Americans? So Trump won the election, and that's because he came out and said the obvious to some extent.
Yeah, I think that I think people are really now repulsed by political correctness. I really think most people are when they watch these college students. This was hilarious. We're talking to Dr. Wilfred Riley. This was hilarious. Last week, or maybe just a couple days ago, it's all a blur, but there were students, I believe, at George Mason, was it James Madison University or George Mason University, who were upset, terribly upset, that Brett Kavanaugh is going to speak overseas somewhere or something that because he's going to speak overseas, they felt triggered.
Yeah, George Mason,
yeah. Wasn't it because he was speaking overseas somewhere? It didn't make any sense. But if you have one person who says, well, I was a victim of sexual violence, his very being triggers me, triggers her, just being Brett Kavanaugh triggers her. Pretty much you can do or say anything, the administration won't touch you. I mean, won't punish you, won't hold you accountable for your words or deeds. And it's like they wear that offense as a shield, as our armor, protecting them from any scrutiny because they're triggered. It's unbelievable. And people are sick of it.
Yeah, I think there are two levels to that. So first of all, you're right. I mean, you see this upsurge of outrage about just unlikely, ridiculous things. And as an academic, I'll own part of that. I mean, that's especially serious on the campus. So yeah, the thing with Brett Kavanaugh, they were angry first that he had ever been allowed to teach again after being accused of, not even sexual assault really, aggressive kissing 30 years ago by a woman. That's what he was accused of. So the idea was that anything, when the court is not in bench, if he were to teach in a law school, that should be prohibited. And then he got a prestigious but overseas speaking gig, a short-term appointment. And the idea was that this is, again, terrible. This rapist should never work again. That's the basic theme there. But this is only one of a couple of protests like this coming from the elite East Coast colleges and from the law schools as of last week. It was either George Washington or American that protested recently, hundreds of students on the quad, because their mascot is the Colonial.
Oh,
They're the Colonials. That's their school team mascot, as the Indians might be.
Yeah,
and they should retire that. Because it's literally George Washington with his hat on and his sword over his back and so on. They should retire the image of George Washington because colonialism is bad. And one of the sources they cited as evidence of this was the movie Black Panther. So, it's out there. I think to a certain extent, people are going to have to decide how much it's worth losing in order to be polite. Are you going to say, this is going well beyond Confederate generals, who I don't have much sympathy for myself. The Founding Fathers also owned slaves. So are we going to get to a point where, because this offends America's young people, we're going to tear down all the statues of Washington and Jefferson?
Well, Hofstra wants that. Hofstra wants Thomas Jefferson out now.
Yeah, that's the people.
This is where it's going. That's why you can't give in on the Robert E. Lee thing, because then it's just a matter of time before you have to raise Monticello. Okay, so that's just, I mean, it's only a amount of time. I mean, you can't argue that Robert E. Lee has to come down and somehow this guy who, hooked up with Sally Heming and then had the slaves and underneath the building is going to somehow be lauded as this great innovator and inventor and builder and thinker and writer. The whole thing has to go. The Declaration has to go. It all has to go. So that's why you can't give in to the Robert E. Lee thing. Mitch Landrieu in the middle of the night takes down a statue. He's hailed as a hero. He's a destroyer of history and context. No context given, just destroy it. Take it away, put it in some. We don't even know where Robert E. Lee is, right? Just an empty pedestal right now in Lee Circle. Maybe Landrieu Circle, is that what we're going to call it? Landrieu Circle?
Well, it'll probably be renamed something like Heming Circle. I mean, so as a black ex-athlete from the North, I've always viewed Confederate veneration as sort of a participation trophy deal. I mean, both sides fought bravely. We won. We don't have slaves anymore. But in general, the idea that attacking things from the historical past that violate the rules of today's left is okay is a very, very dangerous idea. That's going to extend to virtually everything, in my opinion. So, yeah, of course, the Founding Fathers aren't safe. But today, I mean, there's a cute line of greeting cards that I've gotten for my girlfriend in the past, and they say things like, "You're the kind of boy I'd make a sandwich for. You're the kind of girl I'd build a fence for." They're joking about historical gender roles and things that healthy couples still do. Mm-hmm. Right now, that company is facing an existential threat. I mean, there's a national campaign to take these cards out of Hallmark, which is their main source of income, because they have gender stereotypes on them for both men and women. So eventually, this is going to spread to most of mainstream society. And we saw the genesis of this in academia in the 1970s, where the idea is that if someone dislikes something, or more to the point, if any test produces different results for different groups, that means the test itself is racist and should be done away with. So many colleges now don't accept SAT and ACT scores, and the reason for that is that blacks and now Hispanics do slightly worse on the exam than whites do, so the test must be racist. And at some point, you have to stop and say, no, IQ testing actually works. All Americans, including minority groups, should study more for the test. We can't get rid of the idea of intelligence because not everybody has the same intelligence, but it takes a certain level of guts to step up and say that.
Well, it's easier to say that all of law enforcement is inherently racist. There are a few decent people, but that in general it's racist. Because otherwise you have to say, why do we have this disparity in criminal convictions? Why do we have a disproportionate percentage of one group committing crimes over another? Is it just socioeconomic? Is there other things going on? It takes a lot of critical thinking, family breakdown, and so forth. But they need to short circuit that conversation and go right to race, because otherwise that requires some really difficult conversations, hard conversations, but necessary.
Yes, very necessary. That's actually the subject of my next book, Taboo, which I won't pitch here. But
good.
The
Good.
importance of discussing race and class. So in the book Hoax, I say that there's a narrative that I call the CON, the continuing oppression narrative, that underlines the wave of hoax hate crimes.
I love that. I like that acronym. Good.
Yeah, it has some potential.
Good.
But these hoaxes are incredibly much concentrated on the left. The alt-right's trying to get into the game, but to me that's kind of a good description of the alt-right in general. It's an attempt at identity politics by working in middle-class white males. It's just the same thing done in reverse. It's equally bad. But identity politics right now lives on the left. So I look at the narrative that gets into identity politics that underlies the hoax hate epidemic. And the root idea here is that all differences in performances between groups, Tom Sowell talked about this now almost a generation ago, must be due to prejudice. If they're not due to prejudice, as you just said, you have to have tough, real conversations between adults. And very often you're going to have to come out with conservative or sort of moderate business class solutions to these problems. Mm-hmm. The higher crime rates in black communities, for example, have virtually nothing to do with contemporary racism. And by the way, they don't have much of anything to do with genetics either. You don't see this in Nigerian communities, West Indian communities. So you have to look at the actual problems that began during the 1960s, 1970s social collapse in the USA. The fatherlessness rate in the black community is 74%. Both blacks and poor whites have been brutalized by a ruling class that moved tens of millions of blue-collar jobs overseas, often to enemy states. this is clearly the fault of this left for the next one, but ineffective sort of community policing began in black communities during the early 1970s, replacing the previous sort of steely-eyed cops you had in those areas, and you saw crime rates increase 500%. Pay-per-child welfare has contributed to what we call the culture of the slums. So real solutions to the problems of inner-city black communities would have to involve rethinking the basic idea of welfare. Would you have to actually work to receive it? It would involve emphasizing fatherhood, in some cases emphasizing religion, something that's anathema to most of the leftist cultural and social bloc. So if you don't want to have that conversation, you just say racism. Ben Shapiro, conservative commentator, condenses this as racist, sexist, bigoted homophobia. That's the explanation for any difference. Why are there fewer female oil field roughjacks than men? Sexism.
Yeah, because there's no inherent difference between women and men, and they all want to do these jobs, or they all want to do them and are being denied them, or they're being conditioned into not wanting to do these jobs, and are thus not represented in the field. So that's. But I think I'm very heartened about what's going on right now in so many ways, Dr. Riley, because I think with the power of social media, with the power of the internet, and with just a few brave people, and you're one of them, I think people open their eyes, and it happens in different ways and over time. And I think the big con, as you describe it, I think it's becoming really patently obvious. And I think it's less persuasive than ever. The fact that we have 50%, and it's not about Trump. This is not about Trump. This is going to extend way beyond Donald Trump. But it is interesting that after all of the demonization of his desire to enforce the border, he's at 50% approval among Latino Americans. That's amazing.
Yeah. 50%. Trump is probably going to win 30% of the Latino vote if you look at the Pew and Zogby data on that. Yeah, Latinos do not hate Trump.
This is what Candace Owens. I just want to play one more thing that what she said yesterday, and it's about it's about this desire to censor real speech and to keep people afraid, I think, of speaking out. And they do different ways, shadow banning on Twitter, other things. New rules of engagement, standards of community, all this stuff. She said this.
The hearing today is not about white nationalism or hate crimes. It's about fear-mongering, power, and control. It's a preview of the Democrat 2020 election strategy, same as the Democrat 2016 election strategy. They blame Facebook, they blame Google, they blame Twitter. Really, they blame the birth of social media, which has disrupted their monopoly on minds. They called this hearing because they believe that if it wasn't for social media, voices like mine would never exist, that my movement Blexit, which is inspiring black Americans to leave the Democrat Party, would have never come about. And they certainly believe that Donald Trump would not be in office today.
Well, I think they are looking for an explanation for all of this. And it's either just the country's racist. That's one explanation. And the other explanation is that this is all kind of a farce created by Facebook, and hence Facebook is rushing to put in new community standards because they don't want to be blamed for it. And meanwhile, you got a lot of people who claim they're being shadow banned on Twitter and other platforms for merely echoing their political views of someone like Trump. So it's a curious deal out there, Professor.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot there in what you just said. So first of all, by the way, I used to run a small social media brand, and there's no doubt that Facebook and Twitter are shadow banning and outright banning people. My Wilfred Riley page, on days when more than 100 people with sort of center right to right political affiliations like it, becomes much, much harder to find online. And I can explain that in some detail. But you've seen people like Milo Yiannopoulos, for example, simply taken off of all of the major social media platforms on the basis of very flimsy excuses. But in terms of your main point there, that social media, perhaps even something like talk radio, conversations around society, give people a chance to express their opinions honestly. I think that quote-unquote red pilling, which is what everyone I know under 35 calls that, is about halfway to a solution to the problem in America. So I think that the idea of the red pill from the Matrix is that many people, as they either go into the actual stacks of the library or they engage with new media, realize that a lot of the narratives that they hear, some of which we've discussed today, there are no differences between men and women, intelligence is not real, police are murdering young black men, no human being is illegal, people realize that a lot of this is just nonsense, and that is the red pill. But the red pill's only halfway there. What happens to a lot of people in the internet world is that they are then tempted by equally idiotic ideologies on the center or the right. I think that's essentially the genesis of the alt-right, the idea that, well, we know it's not racism that's holding back, say, Hispanics. It must be that everyone of Hispanic heritage is genetically inferior. That is a bad, dumb idea. There is no evidence for that. I mean, about 70% of Hispanics are Caucasian at the simplest level of analysis. And there are all these other goofball philosophies in youth culture. I don't know if you're familiar with the ANCAP movement, anarcho-capitalism. The festival woke kids that want to live off the land. So I think very often when people take the red pill, they then kind of descend into idiocy because they realize the mainstream narrative isn't real, but they're not quite sure what is.
Wait, what's the live off the, hold on a second. You're talking too fast for those of us who work late at night. So wait a second, the live off the land people tell, because I think there are actually a lot of conservatives who are going back to kind of local farming and stuff. There's an interesting Venn diagram of of a lot of kind of earth people with what Trump's doing, believe it or not. But then there is another version of that, which I know is way crazy. But tell me about that live off the land group you're referring to.
There's a huge amount of that. I mean, if you go through Facebook or Instagram, the gram, quote unquote, you'll see all these pages like, hipster chickens in the city. There's an idea that society is inherently corrupt. I'm inclined to think this to some extent about human societies, but that people should reject mainstream leftist society in favor of, in the Afrocentrist community, traditional methods from Africa. People use the term woke to describe another group, festival attendees, who take a bunch of drugs and run kind of badly organized communes. I think this is funny, too, and interesting as well. But the point with that really was just that if you are, quote-unquote, red-pilled, if you realize that, say, what Black Lives Matter says is mostly BS, as I discussed in Hoax, there are less than 1,000 people killed by police each year. Only about 200 of them are black. The black percentage is slightly higher than the black percentage of the population, but that's because of higher crime rates. There sort of is no story here. Once you realize a lot of these major truths, you then should not move into disengagement from politics altogether or into racism. So my final solution is the red pill is halfway there. I do think that people need to start offering mainstream conservative voices, centrist voices need to start using these platforms and offering alternatives. So if you understand that racism is probably not the reason that America's slums exist in their current form, what is the reason? We've discussed that today. And how do you fix these problems? And I also think that people that are heterodox need to start, to the extent that they can, either developing alternatives to the major social media technologies.
Yes.
Or, that is my preference. Or lobbying to some extent to have them stop engaging in the behavior that they're engaging in now. I mean, Facebook, for example, is treated by the government as a common carrier, as the phone lines are. AT&T is. And legally, as you know, the argument there is that if you're a common carrier, you're a service provider, you're not responsible for what people say.
Right.
AT&T is not responsible for people making cocaine deals over the phone, nor should they be. Facebook, I think, is really near a line here, though, because they're censoring such a large number of people, from Laura Loomer to Tommy Robinson to you old blacks trillions on the left, Milo Yiannopoulos. So if you're acting not as a content provider, but as a content platform, as a censor, legally, then you should be held responsible for the things that people say on your platform. So social media should be confronted by business and, if necessary, by the government with that sort of ultimatum. If you're going to keep censoring people, we're going to hold you liable as a content censor or content vector for everything that's on there. And I think that confronted with that threat, social media would go back to allowing free speech. But right now, I mean, I recently signed up to sell ads for one of my Facebook pages, which is called Innovative Systems. It's a platform for young inventors, developers, some farmers on there, young tech guys. And in order to do this, I was told that I had been reported as a suspicious person by Facebook or to Facebook. possibly because I'd said something conservative online. Can't imagine what else the reason would be. But in order to run the ads, I had to send in a back and frontal picture of my face on my ID. I had to give them my address. It was this sort of 8-stage approval process. And I think that if social media is going through that kind of screening of people, where many perspectives would just be rejected at the start of the process, they shouldn't be allowed to claim that they have no control over what's on their platform.
Now, I think there's a lot of interesting legal pathways, I think, that need to be examined. Professor, it's great to have you on. Thank you so much. We look forward to your next book coming out about this entire charade. It's now patently obvious, and it should be to everyone, that these individuals are trying to stop free expression, intimidate you from speaking out, and circumscribe speech in general. This is what their goal is, because they can't win the argument. So they have to destroy you as a person. That's what this is about. Trump said, no way. That's why Trump's like, I'm never going to apologize. Once you apologize to these frauds, then you're done. I want to thank all of our sponsors again who supported this podcast today. Genucell, Delta Animal Rescue, Vital, Legacy Box, and Brush Hero. All fabulous. And remember, if you want to be part of this podcast, all you need to do is email us at ingram.podcast@gmail.com. That's ingram.podcast@gmail.com. America, now and forever on the Laura Ingraham Podcast.